One of the capabilities of Spring MVC is the ability to pass data back to our controllers via a URI template. A URI template basically inputs a variable into the URL that our dispatcher servlet will be serving the request for. You might be familiar with URI templates when looking at things like RESTful URLs. You see this very commonly in a lot of RESTful APIs. You will see in the path that is sent to the API, the actual item you'd like to receive, so something like /user/ and then the user's ID. And that really represents a URI template. Within our lesson, we're going to learn how to use Spring MVC's URI templates. If we navigate to our application and we click on the projects item in the menu and then click on Find, we receive this table, and on the left side of our table, we see the name of each project. What we are going to do is make that project name a hyperlink, and the hyperlink will contain the information we need to display a more detailed view of the individual project. And the way we're going to do that is within the URL, we're going to embed a URI template. We'll see something like /project/project ID. And that's going to pass that information back to our controller, where we will extract the project ID and use that information to display the appropriate project within the project.jsp file. And this is just a JSP page that has been created to display some information about a single project. What we'll need to do is within our projects.jsp file, we'll navigate down to the table, and within this table, we're going to add a URL in the first table cell. So I'm just going to organize this a little bit, and now I'm going to add an anchor. And for the href attribute, I'm going to use a Spring URL. That way we have the context root appended to the path we specify for the value. Within the value, we're going to use /project and then /, and now we're going to use JSPEL to reference the project ID of the project being displayed in the table. And then we need to close our anchor tag. We'll make the project name display within the anchor. So I'm just going to drop the value attribute down to the next line to make it display a little bit better. What this will do is establish our URI template. We will know that we're going to pass back a project ID, and within the path we're going to see /project/ the ID of the project. Spring MVC can take that information and extract out this project ID. Well, how do we do that? So we need to create a new controller method, and at this point I'm actually going to save all of our work, and now we're going to make our controller method. So I'm going to call this method findProject. It should return a string, and the string it's going to return is project, and I'm going to pass the model into this controller method because we would like to put the individual project object into our model. If we look at our project service, you'll notice that we have added a find method, and this find method simply takes an ID and returns the corresponding project within our list of projects. Now you will notice this is using a Java 8 Lambda expression. You need to be using Java 8 as required by the course. We're going to navigate back to our project controller now, and we're going to add that attribute to the model. We're going to create a project, and then we're going to use our service, and we're going to use the find method, and there we need to pass in a long that is the ID of the project we'd like to work with. In order to get that ID, we need to add a long argument to our controller method, and we'll call that project ID. Where do we get that project ID from? Well, we're going to map the request, so we're going to add the request mapping annotation to our method, and there we see our console taking effect to try to put our changes in place. And we're going to set the value to simply project ID in curly braces. The project portion of the path will map to our controller, and then it's going to drop down to this variable we've specified as the project ID. So what will really get mapped here is something like this when we take into consideration the type request mapping, but we're just using the variable piece in this method. The project ID is going to get passed to our find project method, and then what we can do to define we would like that URI template variable to be assigned to our method argument is add the path variable annotation. I've taken a little bit of a shortcut here because if your URI template variable matches the name of your argument, you do not need to define the name of the path variable. But if there was a mismatch, let's say I did something like this, then we would need to provide the name of the URI template variable we would like to use. We would have to specify we're using the project ID URI template variable. But we're just going to match up the names of the method argument and that variable just because it's best case. And normally I always like to just use the path variable annotation with the actual name of the variable there. At this point, we should be able to run our application. We'll return and we'll click projects, find. There we see that we have the hyperlinks. And now if you look at the bottom of the screen, you see /course-project/project/1. And if we click on our Java project, we will now drill down into the Java project and get to see the individual details of that project. And that's because we passed one back as a URI template variable. Here you can actually see in the URL that we have passed back the ID of the project as a URI template.